I still remember the day. Everything felt normal. I'm late again, aren't I? I said while grabbing my coat. Lena didn't even look up from her phone. You're always late. That company owns your life more than I do. I smiled. It's not that dramatic. Victor walked in through the office door like he owned the place. You two fighting again? Good, means business is alive. I laughed. We're not fighting. We're negotiating survival. Maya called me right then. Bye, you coming home tonight? I'll try, I said. Don't wait up. Victor leaned on my desk. We need to talk about investors. Now, I asked. Yes, now. Lena finally looked at me. You always choose him over us. That's not true, I said quickly. Victor interrupted. She's just stressed. We all are. I rubbed my forehead. Fine. Talk. Victor lowered his voice. We're running out of time. One deal can fix everything. What kind of deal? I asked. One that needs trust, he said. I frowned. That sounds dangerous. He smiled. Everything big is. Later that night, I drove home alone. Victor texted me. Urgent. Meet me on Highway Road 7. I replied, why? Just come. No questions. I sighed. Fine. When I reached, the road was empty. Victor, I called. No answer. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. A voice said, your brakes won't work in 10 seconds. What? I shouted. Suddenly the car jerked. Victor, this isn't funny. I yelled. The steering wheel locked. No, no, no. I screamed. The car hit the barrier and flipped. Cold water rushed in. I couldn't breathe. This is how I die, I thought. I saw Lena's face. I saw Maya crying. I saw Victor smiling. Everything went black. Then silence. Then pain. Then nothing. I woke up coughing. A rough voice said, don't move. I opened my eyes slowly. A man in white coat stood there. Where am I? I whispered. Clinic, he said. You're lucky to be alive. My phone, my wallet, I said weakly. He shook his head. Nothing was found. Who are you? I asked. Dr. Hassan, he said. You were pulled from River Edge. River, I repeated. Yes. You were declared dead, he said calmly. You said Upfest. What do you mean dead? He looked at me seriously. Your body was identified. There was a funeral. I felt my chest freeze. That's impossible, I whispered. He handed me a small newspaper. My face, my name. Rip. I couldn't breathe again. No, I said. Yes, he replied softly. I grabbed his coat. Let me out. You need rest, he said. I need answers. I shouted. That night, I sneaked out. I found an old phone in the clinic storage. I searched my name. I saw it. My funeral. Lena was crying. Victor was holding her. Her hand was in his. I dropped the phone. My legs gave out. She's with him, I whispered. My whole life cracked open. I said quietly, I'm not dead. Then I said again, stronger, I'm not dead. And in that moment, I stopped being the man they buried. Dr. Hassan came back later that night. You should not be walking, he said. I stared at him. You told me I'm dead. I told you what the world believes, he replied. I grabbed his collar. My wife buried me. He didn't move. And someone wanted it that way. My hand shook. Victor, he nodded slowly. I don't know names, but breaks don't fail like that. I stepped back. Why help me then? He sighed. Because you're the first who woke up. I laughed bitterly. Lucky me. He placed a phone on the table. Call no one from your old life. I already have no life, I said. That night, I lay on the clinic bed staring at the ceiling. I kept seeing Lena holding Victor's hand. I gave them everything, I whispered. A tear rolled down. No, I said again. I gave them too much trust. Dr. Hassan entered again. You must decide. Decide what? I asked. Disappear again or fight back. I stood up slowly. If I am already dead, I looked at him. Then I can become something else. He didn't answer. I walked to the mirror. My reflection looked broken. I said quietly, they buried me wrong, and I will make sure they regret it. I left the mirror and walked back to Dr. Hassan. I need help, I said. He looked at me. Help to do what? To go back, I replied. He frowned. Back is dangerous. I stepped closer. My life is already taken. I want it back anyway. He studied me for a long moment. Then you'll need a new identity. I nodded slowly. Give me anything. Just not dead. He sighed and opened a drawer. There's a man who helps people disappear. I asked, And he asked for what? Truth, he said. I clenched my fist. Then I have plenty. He wrote an address on paper. If you go, there is no return. I smiled faintly. I already died once. Return is not my problem. He handed me the paper. Be careful. I took it. Careful is what killed me the first time. I walked out into the night, my chest heavy, but burning with something new. Not fear, not grief. Something colder. Resolve. I will not be the same again, ever starting now completely. I stayed hidden in the countryside, far from the city that once knew my name. Dr. Hassan said, "You need time before you face anything." I answered, "Time won't fix what they did." He looked at me, "But it will keep you alive." I didn't argue. I just nodded. Days passed like broken pieces. One morning, I asked him, "Do you have internet here?" He hesitated. Old system. Slow. "I need it," I said. He brought a small laptop. "Don't search your name too much," he warned. I laughed bitterly. That's all I have left. The first thing I typed was my company name. My hands froze. I whispered, no way. Victor's face appeared on a news article. New CEO Victor Rahim expands empire. I stared at the screen. He took it, I said. Dr. Hassan stood behind me. What did you see? I turned the laptop toward him. He took everything. He stayed silent. I kept scrolling. Then I saw it. My house transferred. My assets moved. My life insurance claimed. I whispered, Lena. Dr. Hassan said quietly, your legal identity is still dead. I laughed without humor. Dead people lose everything, right? He didn't answer. I closed the laptop. My chest felt like it was burning. Later, Imet Arif. He wiped his hands. Doctor said you needed help. I said, I need more than help. He frowned. What kind? I looked around. Privacy. He laughed. This is a workshop, not a palace. I just need a place to think, I said. He shrugged. Fine. Don't break anything. I stayed there nights later. Arif asked, what are you running from? I said, from my own funeral. He froze. That's not funny. I replied, I'm not joking. He studied me. You look like a ghost. I said, that's what they think I am. He didn't ask more after that. One night, I created a fake identity. Arif watched. You're doing illegal stuff. I said, I'm already dead. Laws don't apply. He shook his head. That's not how life works. I replied, it is now. I started watching news daily. Victor appeared everywhere. My dream company, he said in an interview. I whispered, my dream, not yours. Then I saw Lena beside him, smiling, laughing, comfortable. I froze. Arif asked, you okay? I said nothing. He looked at the screen. That your wife? Yes, I said quietly. She looks happy, he said. I clenched my fist. Too happy. Days later, I saw a clip. Victor speaking at a conference. I built this from struggle, he said. I laughed loudly. You built nothing, I said to the screen. Arif asked what happened. I pointed. That man built his life on my death. He frowned. That's serious? I said, worse. Then I saw Maya. She was standing at a memorial. Her voice shook. My brother didn't deserve this. My throat tightened. Arif said softly, she loved you. I couldn't speak. I watched her cry. Again and again. I miss you, she said in the clip. My eyes burned. I turned away. I whispered, Maya. Dr. Hassan later said, you shouldn't watch that. I said, she's the only truth I have left. He replied, truth can break you. I said, I'm already broken. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Maya crying, and Lena smiling with Victor. I stood outside. The air was cold. I whispered, they moved on. My voice cracked. Without me. Arif came out. You're shaking. I said, I'm not shaking. He said, you are angry. I laughed. No. I looked at him. I'm erased. He stayed quiet. I finally said it out loud. I can't stay dead. Arif frowned. What does that mean? I said slowly, I go back. He said, back to what? I looked at the sky. To them. He stepped back. That's dangerous. I nodded. Good. He asked why. I said, because now I know the truth. Dr. Hassan watched from behind. Truth doesn't always win. I replied, then I will make it win. I turned away. For the first time, I felt it clearly. Not grief. Not confusion. Direction. I whispered to myself, if they buried me. I clenched my fist. I will dig myself out. Arif grabbed my arm. Listen to me. Revenge doesn't bring life back. I pulled away. I don't want life back. I want justice. He said, you're not thinking straight. I said, for the first time, I am thinking clearly. Dr. Hassan stepped forward. If you go back, they will hunt you. I replied, let them try. He said quietly, you will lose yourself. I looked at him. I already lost myself when they pushed me into that river. Silence fell. Arif lowered his voice. What do you need from me? I said, nothing. Just don't stop me. He nodded slowly. Then I won't. I walked back inside the workshop. My reflection in the glass looked different now. Not weak. Not dead. Something between both. I whispered, this is not survival anymore. I paused. This is war. That night, I packed nothing because there was nothing left to carry. Arif said, where will you go? I replied, where it all ended. He frowned. You don't even have a plan? I said, I don't need one. I only need a start. Dr. Hassan watched me silently. Finally, he said, if you cross this line, you won't be the same man. I looked at him. That man died already. He nodded slowly. Then may God protect what comes next. I stepped outside into the dark road. For a moment, I stopped walking. I closed my eyes and heard everything again. The crash, the water, the silence. Then I opened my eyes. I'm not coming back as a victim, I whispered. I'm coming back as the consequence. I started walking forward without looking back, feeling every step erase the old me completely, like the world itself was preparing for my return. Nothing would ever be the same again now. I said to Arif, I need my car. He frowned. Your car isn't a junkyard river dump. It's scrap now. I replied, that scrap holds my truth. He stared at me. You're obsessed. I said, I'm alive because something went wrong. I need to know what. He sighed. Fine, but I'm coming with you. We reached the junkyard at sunset. The man at the gate said, you're here for what? I answered, a crashed black sedan, registered under my name. He laughed. We got hundreds. Arif stepped forward. Just let us in. After some arguing, we entered. The air smelled like rust and oil. Arif said, this place is death for machines. I replied, and mine was murdered here. We walked through rows of crushed metal. Then I saw it. My car. Twisted. Burned. I froze. Arif said quietly, that's it. I nodded. That's my ending. I touched the metal. Cold. Too real. Open it, I said. Arif looked at me. It's destroyed. Open it, I repeated. He forced the door open. Inside, everything was ruined. But I saw something. A cut line near the brake system. I whispered, that's not damage. Arif leaned closer. That's clean cut. I stepped back. My breathing changed. Someone did this, I said. Arif said, this wasn't an accident. My hand shook. This was planned, I whispered. Something inside me snapped. Not sadness anymore. Anger. Pure. I said, Victor. Arif grabbed my arm. Don't jump to conclusions. I pulled away. There is no conclusion. Only truth. That night, I contacted Sarah. She answered, who is this? I said, someone Victor betrayed. Silence. Then she said, you shouldn't call me. I said, I know what he did. She froze. Who are you? I hesitated. Then I said, someone who died because of him. Her voice dropped. No. I said, yes. She whispered, that crash. I said, wasn't an accident. She went silent for a long time. Then she said, meet me. We met in a small cafe at night. She looked nervous. If Victor finds out. I interrupted, he won't. She stared at me. You look different. I said, I am. She leaned forward. He was moving money for months. I frowned. What money? She said, company funds. Offshore accounts. I clenched my jaw. He stole from me. She nodded. He planned to push you out. I asked, push me out how? She hesitated, then said, you were not supposed to survive that deal. My hands tightened. I said, tell me everything. She lowered her voice. He was working with Lena. The world stopped. I said slowly, say that again. She looked down. They were close, too close. I stood up slightly. Define close. She whispered, months before the crash. My chest burned. I sat back down. Lena, I said quietly. Sarah said, I'm sorry. I shook my head. Don't be. She added, there's more. I looked at her. She said, they took life insurance on you. I froze. She continued, weeks before your accident. My throat went dry. I whispered, that's impossible. She shook her head. It's real. I leaned forward. Who signed it? She hesitated, then said, Lena. Everything blurred for a second. I whispered, my wife. Sarah said softly. I didn't want to believe it either. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly. Arif asked later, what did she say? I didn't answer. He said, your face. I said they planned it. He froze. Planned what? I looked at him. My death. Silence hit the room. Arif stepped back. That's not possible. I said, it is. He shook his head. People don't do that. I laughed bitterly. They do when greed speaks louder than love. That night, Sarah introduced me to Detective Farouk. He looked at me carefully. You're the dead man? I said, apparently I'm inconveniently alive. He studied me. Why should I believe you? I said, because I have nothing left to lose. He sat down. Tell me. I told him everything. The crash. The brakes. The funeral. Victor. Lena. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, if this is true, it's murder. I said, it is true. He leaned back. You understand what you're asking? I said, justice. He shook his head. Justice is slow. I said, I've been dead long enough. He studied me again, then said, I can't officially help you. I asked, unofficially? He paused, then nodded. Unofficially. Sarah said, this is dangerous. I said, everything I touch now is dangerous. Detective Farouk said, we need proof on paper. I said, we already have truth. He replied, truth doesn't win in court. I leaned forward. Then what does? He said, evidence. That night I couldn't sleep. Arif asked, you okay? I said no. He said, you look like you're burning inside. I replied, I am. I kept replaying everything. Lena's signature. Victor's face. The insurance papers. Arif said softly, what will you do now? I stared at the wall. I have two choices, I said. He asked what choices. I said slowly, expose them or destroy them. He frowned. That's not justice. I said no. I looked at him. That's survival. He said, and which will you choose? I didn't answer immediately. Then I whispered, I don't know yet, but deep inside I already did, because something in me had changed forever, and whatever I chose next would not end quietly. I said to Sarah, I'm staying dead. She blinked. You mean permanently? I replied, to them, yes. To me, I'm just getting started. Arif frowned. That sounds insane. I looked at him. So was killing me and calling it an accident. Sarah said softly, what's your plan then? I said, rebuild everything they stole. From the shadows. She hesitated. With what identity? I smiled faintly. A new one. Detective Farouk later said, this is risky. I replied, everything I've lived since the crash is risky. He nodded slowly. Then let's begin carefully. Sarah helped me create it. A new name. A new company. A ghost on paper. She said, no one will connect this to you. I asked, not even Victor? She shook her head. Especially not Victor. Arif watched the process. You're really doing this? I said, I already died once. This is just continuation. He muttered, you sound different now. I replied, I am different. Weeks passed. I worked quietly. Late nights. Silent calls. Hidden meetings. Sarah said, old clients are responding. I asked, why would they trust a new name? She smiled. Because your old work still speaks for itself. That gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time. Power. Detective Farouk came one night. I found movement in Victor's accounts. I leaned forward. Explain. He said, contracts are shifting. Slowly. I asked to where. He looked at me. To you. I exhaled slowly. Arif said, that means it's working. I nodded. It means he's starting to bleed. Farouk added, without knowing why. I said, perfect. One evening, Sarah said, there's someone you should meet. I asked who. She replied, Mr. Khan. I frowned. Never heard of him. She said, you've heard of Victor's rival. I paused. The one he crushed years ago. She nodded. That one. I said, why would he help me? She replied, because he hates Victor more than anyone. They met in a quiet restaurant. Mr. Khan looked at me and said, "You don't look dead." I replied, "I was told I was." He smirked. "I like you better alive." I said, "I'm technically both now." He laughed. Interesting answer. I asked, "Why meet me?" He leaned forward. "Because Victor stole everything from me first." I nodded. "So we share an enemy." He said, "We share a goal." I asked, "Which is?" He said simply, "Destruction of his empire." I didn't smile. I said, "I don't want destruction." He raised an eyebrow. "What then?" I said, "Reclamation." He studied me. "You're dangerous." I replied, "I'm precise." He nodded slowly. "Good. I like precise people." We shook hands. That night, Arif said, "You trust him too easily." I said, "I trust no one. I use everyone." He frowned. "That's new." I said it had to be. Days later, Detective Farouk said, "Victor's company is unstable." I asked, "How unstable?" He replied, "Contracts are disappearing." I said, "Good." Sarah added, "Your new company is taking them." I said nothing, but inside I felt it. The shift, the rise. Victor was losing ground. Slowly, quietly, without knowing why. Then I saw Lena again. Online, smiling. Vacation photos. Luxury dinners. Arif said, "She looks happy." I replied, "It's a performance." He said, "Maybe she moved on." I said sharply, "No one moves on that fast from death." Sarah looked at me. "You still care?" I hesitated, then said no, but it wasn't fully true, because at night I still saw her face, and I still remembered the way she held Victor's hand. Then Maya came back into everything. Detective Farouk said, "She's asking questions again." I froze. "About what?" He replied, "Your death." I whispered, "She's still digging?" Sarah said, "She never stopped." I felt something tighten inside me. Arif said, "You should tell her." I snapped no. He said, "She deserves to know." I said, "Not yet." Farouk added, "If she finds out alone, it could ruin everything." I clenched my fist. I can't risk her safety. Sarah asked softly, "Were your plan?" Silence. Because it was both. That night, I watched old footage again. Maya speaking at my memorial. Her voice breaking. "I know my brother is out there somewhere," she said. My chest tightened. Arif said quietly, "She believes in you." I whispered, "She shouldn't." He said, "Why?" I said, "Because I'm becoming someone she wouldn't recognize." Sarah looked at me. "What do you mean?" I said, "I don't feel like a man anymore." Arif frowned. "Then what do you feel like?" I looked at the screen. A ghost. A system. A silence moving through their lives. I said, "Something colder." Farouk said, "That's what revenge does." I replied, "No." I stood up. "This is not revenge anymore." Sarah asked, "Then what is it?" I said quietly, "Control." Arif said, "You're losing yourself." I answered no. I looked at him. "I'm removing everything they can use against me." Silence again. Then Sarah said, "Even Maya?" That hit harder than anything else. I didn't answer immediately, because the truth was dangerous. If I reveal myself too early, everything collapses. If I stay hidden too long, I lose her forever. Arif said softly, "You can't save everyone from the shadows." I whispered, "I know." I still stayed in them, because I wasn't ready to choose yet. Not between revenge and love. Not between justice and truth. Not between the man I was and the ghost I was becoming. All I knew was this. Victor's world was starting to crack, and I was the silence inside those cracks. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was surviving anymore. I felt like I was waiting. I said to Farouk, "Is it starting?" He didn't look up from his files. "It's already started." I asked how bad. He replied, "Victor is bleeding contracts." Sarah leaned forward. Mr. Khan pulled out publicly. I nodded slowly. "That was fast." She said, "You didn't want to wait anymore." Arif muttered, "So the empire is cracking." I said quietly, "Good." Farouk added, "And it's spreading." I looked at him. "Explain." He said, "Other investors are panicking." Sarah said, "They're withdrawing." I leaned back, without knowing why. Farouk nodded. "Exactly." I whispered, "Perfect." One night, Sarah said, "I sent the documents." I asked which ones. She replied, the financial transfers. Arif frowned. You leaked them? She nodded. Anonymously. I looked at her. Risky. She said, necessary. Farouk added, it strengthens the case. I said, then Victor is already cornered. Sarah replied, not yet, but close. Then it happened. Victor appeared on news again, but this time he was not smiling. Reporters said, multiple fraud allegations have surfaced. Arif pointed. Look at him. I watched. Victor's face was tense. His voice shaky. This is false, he said, but his eyes betrayed him. I said quietly, he knows. Sarah leaned in. He knows it's collapsing. Farouk said, and he doesn't know who is attacking him. I whispered, that's the point. Then Lena appeared beside him. But she wasn't smiling anymore. She looked tired, angry, frustrated. I froze. Arif said, they look different. I said nothing, because I was hearing something else. Later, Sarah played a recording. Victor's voice first. We need to stay calm. Then Lena's voice snapped back. Calm? You rushed everything. I leaned forward immediately. Play that again. Sarah rewound. Victor said, it was necessary. Lena shouted, you said he wouldn't survive. Silence hit the room. Arif whispered, she knew. Farouk said quietly, she was part of it. I didn't blink. Sarah continued playing. Victor said, we had a plan. Lena replied, your plan is destroying us. I clenched my fist. Arif asked, what did she mean? I answered coldly, me. Farouk said, this confirms involvement. Sarah stopped the recording. The room went silent. I stood up slowly. So it wasn't just Victor, I said. No one answered. I whispered, she knew. That night, Farouk came with news. Maya met me. I turned sharply. What? He said. She came asking questions. My chest tightened. What did you tell her? He said, nothing fully. Just enough to keep her calm. I asked, did she believe you? He hesitated. No. Sarah said softly. She never stopped believing you're alive. I turned away. Arif said, you should see her. I snapped, no. Farouk said, she's close to the truth. I said, that's dangerous. Sarah asked, for her or for your plan? Silence. Then Farouk said, she cried when I didn't answer directly. My hands tightened. She knows something is wrong, he added. I whispered, she always knew. Arif said quietly, you can't keep her in the dark forever. I said, I have to. Sarah asked why. I said, because Victor is desperate now. Farouk nodded. He's trying to sell the company. Arif frowned. Sell it. I said, before it collapses. Sarah said, but no one is buying. Farouk added, because of the fraud pressure. I leaned forward. So he's trapped. He nodded. I whispered, good. That night, I watched Victor again. He was yelling in a private meeting. You all betrayed me, he shouted. Lena responded coldly. You brought this on us. I watched closely. Their voices cracked. Their unity breaking. Arif said, they're turning on each other. Sarah said, fear does that. I replied, truth does that faster. Farouk entered. We're ready. I asked, ready for what? He said, charges. I stayed silent. Sarah looked at me. This is it. Arif said softly, final stage. I nodded slowly, but inside, something wasn't settled. Because justice was happening. But I wasn't there yet. I said quietly, they need to see me. Sarah frowned. That's risky. Farouk said, it could ruin everything. Arif said, we're completed. All eyes turned to me. I said, I didn't survive for paperwork. Sarah asked, then why? I answered, so they know what they did. Silence again. Farouk said, revealing yourself now changes everything. I said, good. Arif stepped forward. You're not thinking clearly. I looked at him. I've never thought more clearly. Sarah said softly, you're not just fighting them anymore. I asked, then what am I fighting? She replied, yourself. That hit harder than I expected. I turned away, because she was right. Revenge had stopped feeling like revenge. It felt like identity, and identity was slipping. Farouk said, we move tomorrow. I nodded, but I knew something else. Tomorrow wasn't just about their collapse. It was about my return. And when I came back, I wouldn't be the man they buried. I would be the consequence they could no longer avoid. I whispered to myself, This ends with me standing in front of them. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I was ready for what that meant. I stood outside the courtroom and heard Farouk say, "Once you walk in, there's no turning back." I replied, "I already turned back from death." Sarah looked at me. "You sure about this?" I said no, but I'm done hiding. Arif exhaled. "Then go finish it." I nodded once. Inside, Farouk whispered, "Stay calm. Let me lead." I said, "They don't deserve calm." He replied, "They deserve proof first." We entered. The room was full. Victor sitting at one side, Lena beside him, lawyers everywhere. Then silence hit. Because I walked in, I heard someone whisper, "That's impossible." Another said, "He's dead." I stopped. I said loudly, "Not anymore." The entire room froze. Victor stood up fast. This can't be real." I looked at him. "It is." Lena's hand flew to her mouth. "No." Her chair fell as she stood. "You're dead," she shouted. I said, "So you thought." Victor's face drained of color. He whispered, "How are you alive?" I replied, "Bad planning." Farouk raised his voice. "Court is now in session." He placed documents on the table. "These are financial fraud records," he said. Then Sarah stood. She said clearly, "I testify." Victor snapped, "You traitor." Sarah didn't move. I told the truth. Farouk added, "Insurance fraud, asset transfer, attempted murder investigation." The judge leaned forward. I stayed silent. Then Lena broke. "No," she whispered. "This wasn't supposed to happen." I looked at her. She stepped forward. "I didn't mean it like this," she cried. Victor hissed, "Shut up." Lena turned to him. "You said he wouldn't survive." Victor shouted, "Because you agreed." The courtroom exploded in noise. I raised my hand. Silence returned. I said, "Stop blaming each other." Lena looked at me, crying. "I made a mistake." I said nothing. She stepped closer. "Please." I was scared. I replied, "So you chose murder?" She broke down. "I didn't know it would happen like this." Victor laughed bitterly. "You always knew." He pointed at me. He was in the way. I stared at him. He said louder, "It was business." I stepped forward. "You cut my brakes." He froze. I said, "You watched me die." Victor shouted, "I did what I had to." I replied, "No, you did what you wanted." Farouk signaled officers. Victor tried to move, but it was over. Lena fell to her knees. "I'm sorry," she cried. "I'm sorry." I looked down at her, but I felt nothing. Then I heard footsteps. "Maya." She ran into the courtroom. "Maya, wait," someone said, but she didn't stop. She saw me. She froze. Her voice broke. "Bye." I nodded once. That was enough. She ran. She hit me in the chest and held on tight. "I knew it," she cried. "I knew you were alive." I held her for the first time in forever. She said, "Don't leave me again." I whispered, "I'm here." She cried harder. The room stayed silent. Even Victor didn't speak. Farouk said, "Case is clear." Officers moved in. Victor shouted, "This isn't over." Lena screamed, "Please." But it was. They were taken away. Their voices faded. Their empire collapsed in front of everyone. Sarah exhaled. "It's done." Arif nodded slowly. Finally. Maya still held my hand. She said, "I thought I lost you." I replied, "They tried." She looked at me. "You changed." I said I had to. Days later, everything was finalized. Victor, prison. Lena, charges confirmed. Their names destroyed. My company returned legally. Farouk said, "It's yours again." I replied, "It never stopped being mine." Sarah smiled faintly. "What now?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I walked with Maya. We stood in front of a small graveyard. She asked, "Why are we here?" I said, "I need to see something." We stopped at a stone. "My name." "Fake death marker." She whispered, "This is you." I nodded. She asked, "How does it feel?" I said slowly, "Empty." She said, "Are you angry?" I thought for a moment, then said no. She frowned. "Then what?" I looked at the grave. "I survived." She stayed quiet. I continued, "That's all I did." Maya said softly, "They took everything from you." I replied, "No." She looked at me. I said, "They took my old life." I paused and gave me a new one I didn't choose. She held my hand tighter. I whispered, "Revenge didn't fix anything." She said, "Then what did?" I looked at her. Survival. We walked away together. The wind was quiet. No more running. No more hiding. Just silence. And for the first time, it didn't feel heavy. It felt finished. I looked at the sky and thought. They told me I was dead. But losing everything was the only way I learned how to live.